The wind chose the worst possible moment. Harrison Cole froze, sandwich halfway to his mouth, as the gust tore through the beach cabana 15 feet away. White fabric flew. Bronzed skin flashed in the afternoon sun. And then, eye contact. Direct. Unmistakable. His boss, Natalie Brooks, the CEO who'd fired 3 people last month for missing deadlines, stood there catching him mid-stare at her exposed chest. His 6-year-old daughter Ruby laughed beside him, oblivious, building her sandcastle. Harrison's mind raced through every HR policy he'd ever signed. But instead of fury in those sharp green eyes, he saw something else. Amusement. No, recognition of the same exhaustion he felt every single day. The question wasn't whether he'd lose his job. The question was why she smiled. Harrison had promised Ruby this beach day for 3 months. Saturdays never came free at Meridian Marketing, not when you reported to Natalie Brooks. The woman ran the company like a military operation. 3 people fired in 5 weeks for missed deadlines. When her assistant announced a mandatory server shutdown for the weekend, Harrison grabbed the opportunity. Within an hour, he and Ruby were heading toward Santa Monica, Ruby singing about mermaids the entire drive. One day to remember what it felt like to be a dad instead of an employee number. The beach was perfect. Golden sand, crashing waves, seagulls overhead. They'd built castles until noon, Ruby demanding elaborate moats, while Harrison dug until his back ached. By lunchtime, his shirt stuck to him with sweat and salt water. He'd pulled out their sandwiches, and that's when the wind struck. The cabana was 15 feet away, close enough that Harrison's eyes tracked the movement instinctively when white fabric tore loose. He saw skin, shoulders, then more, and his brain needed several terrible seconds to process what he was seeing, to recognize Natalie Brooks, to realize she'd caught him staring while her chest was completely exposed and his sandwich hovered stupidly in front of his face. His first thought was practical. This is how I get fired. His second was worse. She'll think I'm a pervert. His third never formed because Natalie was already walking toward him. Ruby hummed beside him, patting sand onto her castle, completely unaware that her father's career was imploding. Natalie had wrapped a towel around herself, but her expression was unreadable. Those sharp green eyes that usually dissected quarterly reports were fixed on him with an intensity that made his stomach drop. Harrison opened his mouth to apologize, but Natalie spoke first. Her voice was softer than usual, almost amused. That was unfortunate timing. "I'm so sorry," Harrison managed, his voice too high. I didn't mean to. The wind just..." He was making it worse. His face burned, his ears probably bright red. Ruby looked up curiously, not connecting the tall woman to Daddy's scary boss. Natalie's lips twitched, definitely amusement, and she sat down at the edge of their blanket without asking. The gesture was so casual, so unexpected, that Harrison forgot to close his mouth. She looked different out here, without the sharp suits and severe bun. Her hair was loose, dark curls wet from the ocean, and there were actual smile lines around her eyes. "You're Ruby, right?" Natalie said, turning to his daughter with unexpected warmth. Ruby nodded, clutching her shovel. "Your dad talks about you all the time in meetings." Harrison had mentioned Ruby maybe once a month, usually when apologizing for leaving on time for daycare. Natalie must have noticed his confusion because she added, "You show pictures sometimes, when you think I'm not paying attention." Ruby brightened immediately. "Do you want a sandwich? Daddy made too many." Natalie glanced at the cooler, then at Harrison's mortified face, and something shifted in her expression. Understanding, maybe. "What kind?" Ruby dove into the cooler, emerging with a squashed peanut butter sandwich. Natalie accepted it with the grace she brought to client presentations. "This looks perfect." She took a bite, and Ruby beamed. Harrison sat frozen, trying to reconcile this woman eating peanut butter on his daughter's beach towel with the CEO who'd made grown men cry during budget reviews. They didn't match. Nothing matched. "My dad died when I was 8, Natalie said suddenly, eyes on the ocean. The sentence landed heavy between them. It was just me and my mom after that. She worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. Harrison listened, saying nothing. She used to say the hardest part wasn't the money or the hours. It was not having anyone to share the load with. She looked at Harrison then, really looked at him. You have that look, the one my mom had, like you're running a marathon where the finish line keeps moving. Harrison's throat felt tight. He wanted to deny it, but sitting there with sand in his hair and Ruby humming beside him, he couldn't lie. Her mother left when Ruby was 3, he heard himself say. Said she wasn't ready to be a mom. Moved to Portland with her yoga instructor. Natalie nodded like he'd said something profound. She brushed sand off Ruby's knee, a gesture so naturally maternal that something cracked in Harrison's chest. How do you do it? She asked. The job, the kid, the everything. Harrison laughed hollowly. Badly. I do it badly. Natalie turned back to the ocean, and for a long moment, there was only waves and seagulls and Ruby's soft singing. Then she stood, and Harrison's stomach clenched, waiting for reality to reassert itself. But she just smiled down at Ruby. Can I help with your castle? Ruby's face lit up like Christmas. Really? Natalie knelt in the sand and picked up the spare shovel. What are we building? Ruby launched into an elaborate explanation involving towers and princesses and a dragon. Natalie listened with the same focus she gave board presentations, nodding seriously. Harrison watched them work, his brain still catching up with reality. They stayed until the sun started dropping, painting the sky orange and pink. Natalie had helped build 2 more castles, laughed when a wave soaked her legs, and talked about her childhood summers in Maine. She spoke like a normal person, not someone who controlled millions in budgets. When Ruby asked if she had kids, Natalie's smile faltered slightly. No, I never seem to find the time. As they packed up, Ruby yawning and leaning against Harrison's leg, Natalie pulled out a business card and handed it to Ruby instead of him. That's my personal cell number, she said, crouching to Ruby's level. If you ever need anything, you call me, okay? Ruby took the card solemnly. Okay, Miss Natalie. Natalie ruffled Ruby's hair, then stood and met Harrison's eyes. The businesswoman was back in the straightness of her spine. About what happened earlier? Harrison's stomach dropped. Let's just forget it happened. Fresh start Monday morning. No HR paperwork necessary. She said it lightly, but Harrison heard the weight underneath. She was giving him an out. He should have felt relieved. Instead, he felt strangely disappointed. The drive home was quiet, Ruby falling asleep before they hit the highway. Harrison drove with windows down, his mind replaying the day in fragments. The wind, the eye contact, the way Natalie had sat down and eaten a child's sandwich like it was natural, the exhaustion in her voice talking about her mother, the way she'd looked at Ruby like she was seeing something precious she'd forgotten existed. None of it made sense with the woman who'd fired 3 people in 5 weeks, unless that woman was also this woman, and he'd just never seen past the armor. By the time he carried Ruby into their apartment, he'd convinced himself Monday would reset everything to normal. The beach would become just another weird story he'd never tell. Fresh start meant forgetting, didn't it? Monday morning arrived with the usual chaos, Ruby refusing her outfit, breakfast burning, traffic making him 15 minutes late. He sprinted into the office at 9:45, missing the 9:30 design review. His desk was covered in sticky notes. Where are you? And Brooks is looking for you. Great. Perfect. When his phone rang with Natalie's extension, he seriously considered not answering. But that was career suicide. Harrison Cole. My office, please. Her voice was pure CEO, crisp, professional, impossible to read. The walk to her office felt like a death march. His co-workers' eyes tracked him. Poor Harrison, probably couldn't hack the pressure. He knocked at exactly 9:58. Come in. Her office was exactly as he remembered. Floor-to-ceiling windows, expensive desk, shelves of awards. Natalie sat in a charcoal suit, hair in its severe bun, reading glasses on. She looked like she'd never eaten a peanut butter sandwich in her life. Harrison's mouth went dry. She gestured to the chair, didn't look up. This was it. He sat, hands clasped to stop them shaking. Natalie closed her file and removed her glasses. "How's Ruby this morning?" The question was so unexpected that Harrison blinked stupidly. Good. Had a meltdown about colors, but otherwise good." Natalie's lips twitched. "Kids have strong opinions about colors." She opened her drawer and pulled out a glass paperweight, shaped like a sandcastle. She set it between them. "Made me think of Saturday." Harrison stared at it. "I don't understand." Natalie leaned back. "I've been thinking about what you said, about doing everything badly." She paused. "I realized I do the same thing. I run this company badly because I never leave time for anything else. I haven't been to the beach in 3 years. I don't remember the last time I laughed like I did on Saturday." Harrison kept quiet, waiting. Natalie pulled out the HR manual. "This company has a flexibility program for working parents. Page 73. Flexible hours, remote work options, adjusted deadlines. We implemented it 2 years ago." She pushed the paperweight toward him. "No one uses it. Want to guess why?" Harrison could guess. "Because you'll fire them if they do. Because I've created an environment where people are afraid to ask," Natalie corrected. "You're not the only single parent on staff, Harrison. But you're the only one who's never asked for accommodations. Why?" Harrison thought about lying, about professional answers. But the paperweight sat between them like a reminder they'd moved past lies. "Because I need this job. Ruby needs health insurance, and food, and a roof. I can't risk losing it." Natalie nodded. 3 people lost their jobs recently. Dennis was embezzling. Paula was giving client information to competitors. Jeremy. She paused. Jeremy. I got wrong. He left early for his daughter's recital after missing deadlines. I thought he was using his kid as an excuse. Turns out his wife had just been diagnosed with cancer. I fired him for trying to balance an impossible situation. Found out 2 weeks later from his GoFundMe. I sent a check, but that doesn't undo the damage. Harrison sat very still, watching his boss admit to being wrong. "I don't fire people for being human," Natalie said quietly. "I fire people for being dishonest or incompetent. But I've built a culture where those look identical because everyone's too scared to be honest." She pulled out his employee file. "Starting today, you're on flexible schedule. Core hours 10 to 3. Everything else, you figure out what works for Ruby. Work from home when she's sick. Leave early for school events. Your deadlines will be adjusted. This is retroactive to today, which means you're not late. That meeting started before your core hours." She slid the paperwork across. Harrison stared at it like it might be a trap. "Why?" Natalie smiled. Tired, honest, a little sad. "Because watching you with Ruby made me realize what I've been doing to people like you. And because that conversation about exhaustion was the most honest interaction I've had with an employee in 5 years." She stood, walked to her window. "I'm good at my job. Our profit margins prove it. But I'm a terrible leader if my best people are terrified to be human around me." She turned back. "Consider this the start of a company-wide culture shift." The next 3 weeks passed in adjustments. Harrison worked his new schedule tentatively, convinced Natalie would revoke it. But she didn't. Instead, she sent a company-wide email formalizing the flexible schedule program with an HR portal and a guarantee it wouldn't affect performance reviews. She held a staff meeting where she admitted to creating an unhealthy work culture. She rehired Jeremy as a consultant, with a raise and full remote work privileges. The office atmosphere shifted slowly. People started leaving at 5:30. Parents picked up kids without apologizing. Someone brought their baby to a client meeting. Harrison watched it all with awe, knowing he'd witnessed something rare, a powerful person choosing to change. But the strangest part was Natalie herself. She started showing up to the coffee station, making small talk with junior designers. She remembered names, asked follow-up questions, laughed at terrible dad jokes. She'd rescheduled morning meetings to 10:15. She brought bakery cookies to all-hands meetings, and once or twice a week, she'd stop by Harrison's desk around 2:45 and ask if Ruby would like a quick call. She'd discuss Junie B. Jones with the same seriousness she gave quarterly earnings. The company picnic arrived in late July at Griffith Park. Harrison had skipped it 2 years running, but this year's invitation said family-friendly with activities for kids. Ruby had begged to go after seeing the flyer, so Harrison packed sunscreen and dread and drove them Saturday morning. Ruby made a beeline for face painting while Harrison navigated clusters of awkward coworkers. He spotted Natalie immediately, jeans and white t-shirt, playing volleyball with the sales team, laughing when she missed serves. He kept his distance, unsure of the protocol. Ruby found him mid-scavenger hunt, face painted like a butterfly, dragging Natalie by the hand. "Daddy, Miss Natalie says she'll help us with the treasure hunt." Natalie gave him an apologetic look. "She's very persuasive." Harrison couldn't disappoint Ruby, so he nodded. They spent an hour tracking down clues: a red leaf, a smooth stone, a feather. Ruby raced ahead while Natalie matched her pace, and Harrison trailed behind. He watched Natalie point out birds, help Ruby climb walls to reach clues, explain why pond water looked green. When Ruby scraped her knee, Natalie had a Band-Aid ready before Harrison registered what happened. She pressed it gently over the scrape, told Ruby brave explorers always got battle scars. Ruby beamed at her like she'd hung the moon. They won the scavenger hunt. Ruby won, with Natalie as her partner. The prize was an ice cream shop gift card that Ruby wanted to use immediately. Harrison tried to redirect, but Natalie waved him off. "I could use some ice cream. This heat is brutal." So the three of them walked to the ice cream truck, Ruby chattering about wanting to be an explorer who found dinosaur bones. Natalie asked questions like she was interviewing a candidate, taking Ruby's career plans seriously. They ordered mint chip for Ruby, Rocky Road for Harrison, pistachio for Natalie, and found a shaded bench. Ruby sat between them, working on her ice cream with focus, while Harrison and Natalie sat in comfortable silence. It felt domestic in a way that made Harrison's chest tight. Then Ruby leaned her head against Natalie's arm, exhausted from heat and sugar, and Natalie didn't move away. She sat still, let Ruby rest, kept eating one-handed. Harrison's throat felt tight. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For today. For the last month. For all of it." Natalie glanced at him over Ruby's butterfly-painted head. "You don't need to keep thanking me. I'm not doing you a favor. I'm fixing something I broke. Still, thank you." Ruby sat up suddenly. "Can we come back to the beach soon? All three of us?" Her question hung in the air, innocent and devastating. Harrison started to redirect, but Natalie spoke first. "I'd like that." The words were simple, but landed heavy. Harrison met Natalie's eyes, saw something that matched the chaos in his chest: hope, fear, possibility, caution, all tangled together. This was crossing a line. Boss and employee, professional and personal, they were supposed to stay in their lanes. But Natalie had already blown past those lines when she'd sat on his beach blanket and eaten his daughter's sandwich, when she'd given Ruby her personal number, when she'd changed company culture because one conversation had cracked something open. They were past the point of no return. The only question was whether they'd admit it. "Okay," Harrison said softly. "We'll go back to the beach." Ruby cheered, threw her arms around both their necks in a sticky hug. Natalie laughed and hugged Ruby back with one arm. Her free hand found Harrison's on the bench, squeezed once, brief and warm. A promise, or maybe just acknowledgement that they were both terrified and doing it anyway. When she let go, the ghost of her touch stayed. The next month unfolded in small moments Harrison would struggle to explain later. There was the Tuesday Natalie stopped by with a first edition Madeline she'd found at an estate sale, something she shouldn't have been thinking about him enough to purchase. There was the Thursday Ruby called from his phone during a nightmare at school nap time, but Daddy was in a meeting, so Natalie answered instead and talked Ruby down with a story about her own childhood fears. There was the Friday Harrison stayed late to finish the Riverside redesign, and when he'd looked up at 7:30, Natalie was leaning against his cubicle with takeout. "Ruby's with Mrs. Chen tonight, right? Eat something before you pass out." They'd eaten in his cubicle, sharing pad thai, talking about favorite movies and worst client stories. When he'd packed up at 9, she'd walked him to his car, and they'd stood in the parking garage like teenagers afraid to say goodnight. The beach trip happened on a Saturday in August, hot and cloudless. Harrison picked up Natalie at her downtown condo, and Ruby immediately started chattering about castle plans. They drove with windows down, Natalie laughing at Ruby's elaborate architectural visions. The beach was crowded, but they found a spot near the same cabana where everything had started. Ruby pointed at it. "That's where the wind happened," Natalie laughed. "Let's not repeat that particular moment." They spent 4 hours in a bubble where titles didn't matter. Natalie was patient with Ruby's castle engineering, taking directions like a junior architect. Harrison watched them work while he built the moat, his chest so full he could barely breathe. This was what happy looked like. They ate lunch around 1, sandwiches again, because Ruby had insisted, and this time Natalie had made them, cutting them into triangles the way Ruby liked. When Ruby ran off to collect shells, Natalie reached for Harrison's hand in the sand. "I need to tell you something." Harrison's stomach dropped. "My board is pushing for me to step down as CEO, move into a chairman role, let someone younger run day-to-day." Harrison blinked. "Why?" "Because I'm making them nervous with these culture changes. They think I've gone soft, that personal feelings are compromising my judgment." She squeezed his hand, eyes on the ocean. "They're not completely wrong. I have been letting personal feelings in. It's terrifying and exhilarating, and I don't know how to be both CEO and this." She gestured at the beach, at Ruby in the distance, at their hands. "This person who goes to the beach on Saturdays," Harrison thought carefully. "Do you want to be CEO?" "I don't know anymore," Natalie admitted. "I used to think it was everything. But then I spent 3 months watching you choose Ruby over ambition every single day, and I started wondering what I was sacrificing for a job title." She turned to him, vulnerable. "I'm 42 years old. I've built an empire, and I have no one to share it with. No one who calls just to talk. No 6-year-old who thinks I'm magic because I helped with a scavenger hunt. That's not success. That's loneliness with good branding." Harrison lifted their joined hands, pressed his lips to her knuckles. "You don't have to choose right now. You can have both, the job and the life. Isn't that what you've been teaching us?" Natalie smiled, sad around the edges. "Easier to preach than practice." "Then practice with us, with Ruby and me. Let us be the thing you come home to when the board makes you crazy." The words hung between them, a half confession and full invitation. Natalie looked like she was memorizing his face. "I'm not good at this. Relationships, feelings, letting people in." "Lucky for you, I come with a 6-year-old emotional intelligence coach," Harrison said. "Ruby will keep you honest." Natalie laughed, tension bleeding from her shoulders. "I do really like that kid." "She really likes you too. Asked me last week if you could come to her birthday party in September." "Can I?" The question was so hopeful that Harrison's heart cracked open. "Yeah, you can come to her birthday party. You can come to dinner at our apartment that's too small and has water damage. You can come to school, plays, and doctor's appointments, and grocery shopping. You can come to all of it if you want." Natalie's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I want!" Ruby's shriek split the air as she raced toward them, hands full of shells, and they broke apart naturally, making room for her to crash between them. She dumped her treasures onto Harrison's towel, narrating which ones would go on which tower. Natalie listened with the same attention she gave board presentations, and Harrison sat there in the sun, with sand everywhere and salt on his lips, watching his daughter teach his CEO about shell curation, and thought, this is it. This is the moment everything changes for real. The next months blurred by. Natalie started coming to dinner twice a week, helping Ruby with homework at the wobbly kitchen table. She learned to make Ruby's favorite boxed mac and cheese. She met Mrs. Chen, who'd whispered, "She's too fancy for you," but said it with approving smile. She went to Ruby's dental checkup during Harrison's client emergency and sent him a photo. No cavities. We're celebrating with ice cream. Don't tell the dentist. At work, they maintained professional distance, but everyone knew. The whispers evolved from shock to acceptance to approval. The company was thriving. Turnover down, productivity up, satisfaction surveys jumped 20 points. The board couldn't argue with results. September brought Ruby's 7th birthday party at a local park. Harrison had been stressed for weeks. Birthdays were expensive, and Ruby wanted a butterfly theme. Natalie showed up the morning of with boxes from a party store, every butterfly decoration possible, plus a cake from an expensive bakery. You didn't have to do this, Harrison said, overwhelmed. I wanted to, Natalie replied, and Ruby saw the cake and shrieked. The party was chaos, but when they sang happy birthday and Ruby blew out candles, she looked at Harrison on her left and Natalie on her right and said, I wished for us to stay like this forever. Harrison's throat went tight. Natalie's hand found his under the table, squeezed hard. After the party wound down, the three of them sat on the grass in golden afternoon light. Ruby leaned against Natalie, exhausted, playing with her new toys. When Ruby fell asleep right there, head in Natalie's lap, Harrison stopped pretending to clean. He sat across from them, his daughter between them like a bridge. So, he said quietly, forever, huh? Natalie ran her fingers through Ruby's hair, gentle. She has good instincts. Is that what we're doing? Forever? The question should have felt too soon. They'd known each other 3 months, been intentionally spending time together, maybe 6 weeks. But Natalie looked sure. I stepped down as CEO yesterday, she said. Moved to chairman. They're announcing it Monday. Harrison's stomach dropped. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you to think you had anything to do with my decision. This is for me, Harrison. I've been running that company for 12 years. I'm tired. I want to consult, do board work, have a life. I want to be at Ruby's school plays and your apartment with the ceiling leak. I want Saturday mornings and birthday parties and regular dinners where we're not stealing an hour between meetings. Harrison felt like the ground was shifting. That's a big change. I've made bigger ones. I fired my entire management philosophy because one beach conversation made me realize I'd been wrong. Natalie smiled at sleeping Ruby. This is just the next step. The board's okay with it. The board doesn't get a vote on my personal life. Professionally, I'm more valuable as chairman anyway. Strategy without daily operations. They'll name Patricia from finance as CEO. She looked up, met his eyes. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for me. But I'm not going to pretend you and Ruby aren't a massive part of why I want a different life now. Harrison crawled around Ruby and kissed Natalie, soft and careful, tasting birthday cake and salt and possibility. When he pulled back, she was smiling. That's a good reaction. I'm still processing. Take your time, I'll wait. And she would. That was the thing about Natalie. When she committed, she was all in. November brought Thanksgiving. Natalie had been invited to her brother's in San Diego, but showed up at Harrison's apartment Wednesday evening with grocery bags. I'm cooking Thanksgiving dinner, here, for us. Ruby cheered. Ruby. Harrison protested. Her family was expecting her, but Natalie shut him down with a look. I chose here. I'm choosing you two. Get over it. They cooked together, the turkey actually turning out moist, mashed potatoes that Ruby claimed were better than restaurants, and a slightly burned pumpkin pie. They ate around the wobbly table, Ruby between them, talking about what they were grateful for. Ruby said butterflies and ice cream, and Miss Natalie. Natalie said second chances and found family. Harrison said this, meaning the moment and everything it represented. When Ruby went to bed early, food drunk and happy, Natalie pulled a small box from her purse. Harrison's heart stopped. It's not what you think, she said quickly. Or maybe it is. I don't know. Inside was a key. Move in with me, both of you. My condo has 2 bedrooms. Ruby can have 1. Good school district, park 2 blocks away. Shorter commute. Harrison stared at the key. That's massive. I know, but I'm tired of going back to an empty apartment. I'm tired of pretending this is temporary. I want you there when I get home. I want Ruby's art on my fridge. I want this chaos every day. She took his hand. I love you, Harrison. I'm terrible at saying it, but I do. I love you and Ruby, and I want us to be in us all the time. Harrison's voice came out rough. I love you too. Have for weeks. So say yes. Say you'll move in. He kissed her instead, pouring everything he couldn't articulate into it. Gratitude and hope and terror and joy. When they broke apart, he whispered, Yes, we'll move in. They told Ruby the next morning over leftover pie, and she screamed so loud the neighbors heard. The move happened in December, a chaotic weekend of boxes, and Ruby insisting her butterfly collection be displayed immediately. Natalie's minimalist condo transformed into lived-in home. Ruby's toys in the living room, Harrison's art supplies on the table, family photos on the mantel. It was messy and imperfect, and exactly right. Christmas came fast, their first as a real family. They decorated together, Ruby directing tree ornament placement. On Christmas morning, after Ruby had torn through presents and was building with her new blocks, Natalie pulled Harrison aside. One more gift, she said. Something important. She handed him a small box, not a ring box. Inside was folded paper, adoption papers, preliminary ones, starting the process. At the top, in official language, it detailed Natalie Brooks's intention to formally adopt Ruby Cole, pending father's consent and court approval. Harrison's hands shook. You want to adopt her? If you'll let me, Natalie said quietly. I know it's fast. I know we're not married. And this is probably backwards. Yes. Harrison didn't let her finish. Yes. You can adopt her. Yes. I want that. Yes. Natalie's eyes filled with tears she didn't hide. I never thought I'd be someone's mother. Didn't think I had it in me. But Ruby, her voice cracked. She's made me into someone I didn't know I could be. Someone softer. Someone who knows how to love without conditions. Harrison pulled her close, breathing in her familiar scent. Expensive perfume mixed with Ruby's strawberry shampoo and their shared laundry detergent. You're already her mom. The paperwork just makes it official. They told Ruby that afternoon on the couch, her between them. Ruby, you know how some families are made by birth and some by choice. Ruby nodded. I want to choose you. I want to officially be your mom, not just Miss Natalie, but only if you want that too. Ruby looked at her, then Harrison, then back. Would you live with us forever? Already planning on it? Would you come to my school stuff and help with homework and read stories? Every single day. Would you be my mom, not just a friend mom? Natalie's voice was thick. I would be your mom in every way that matters. Ruby thought for 3 seconds, then launched herself at Natalie hard enough to knock the breath from them. Okay, you can be my mom. And just like that, their family was complete. 6 months later, on a Saturday in June, exactly 1 year after the wind had made its choice, they returned to Santa Monica. The adoption was finalized, Natalie's last name now legally attached to Ruby's. Patricia was doing well as CEO, and Natalie's chairman role was letting her live the balanced life she'd craved. Harrison's career had flourished under the flexible structure, but more than any of that, they were happy. Ruby raced ahead to their spot, the same area where everything started. She was 7 now, taller, gap-toothed, but still obsessed with castles and butterflies. Harrison and Natalie walked slower, hands linked, watching her go. Think she remembers this is where we met? Natalie asked. She's been talking about it all week. They spread their towels, and Ruby immediately started planning. This time, both her parents, because Natalie was that now, officially, helped her build. They worked until sunset, until the towers reached impossible heights, and the moat could have housed boats. When they finished, Ruby stood back, hands on hips. This is the best one we've ever made. That's because we're a team now, Natalie said, ruffling Ruby's sandy hair. Good teams make better castles. As the sky turned sherbet colors, they packed slowly, reluctant to leave. Harrison took a photo of Natalie and Ruby in front of their castle, both grinning, ocean behind them. He'd frame this one, add it to their mantle collection. When they reached the parking lot, Ruby ran ahead, leaving them alone. Harrison pulled Natalie close, kissed her temple. You know the exact spot is right there, the cabana where it happened. Natalie laughed, the sound free and light. Where I traumatized my future boyfriend. Where you accidentally showed me you were human, Harrison corrected. Best accident of my life. Natalie turned in his arms, hands behind his neck. I should send that Wind a thank you card. For terrible timing? For perfect timing. If it happened any other way, I might have stayed trapped in that office forever. But the universe decided I needed a shove toward actual happiness. So it sent me an embarrassing moment, a peanut butter sandwich, and a 6-year-old architect. She kissed him softly. Best shove I ever received. Ruby called from the car about ice cream. They broke apart, laughing, and headed toward their daughter. Not once did Harrison look back at the cabana. Some moments were too perfect to revisit. This one, walking toward the car with Natalie's hand in his and Ruby's laughter filling the air. This was what mattered. Not where they'd started, but where they'd ended up. Together, messy and imperfect and exactly right. A family built on accident and choice, on embarrassment and courage, on willingness to be vulnerable when the wind stripped away all the armor. As they drove away, the sunset painting impossible colors, Harrison caught Natalie's eye in the rearview mirror and smiled. She smiled back, and in that exchange was everything. Gratitude, love, promise. The question wasn't whether he'd lose his job anymore. The question was how he'd gotten so impossibly lucky. And the answer was simple. The wind chose the worst possible moment, and it turned out to be exactly the right one.